What's going on, Shield Brothers and Shield Maidens? This is True for Shield Rest, and today I have another adversary encounter build using different types of adversaries in Daggerheart. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's create a baseline for the level of encounters that you can bring to the table using Daggerheart. Now, the equivalent to this is thinking of it like a CR rating for a monster in D&D. However, it is far easier to use this system than D&D when it comes to the CR rating. I like this way more, and here's why. So for an easy encounter, you're going to be able to bring in adversaries equal to the party size that are standard types. Now, you could replace one of those with a different type, being a bruiser, a skulk, or a support. Now, you can also bring in a lower tier adversary and fewer adversaries if you really wanted to, and that will equal in an easy encounter. Now, the next level from this is going to be your standard encounter. This is when you're going to be bringing either a solo adversary, or you're going to be bringing in a number of minions equal to the party size plus 2 to 3 from the bruiser, skulk, standard, or support types. Now, I would also note that this is something that you could kind of get away from. You don't need to use the minions. If you don't want to use minions, you don't have to. And I would suggest that if you're not going to use minions, that you replace those number of minions with at least 1 to 2 extra adversaries. Now, I do this based off of half of the party size rounded up. So if I have 4 players, I'm not only going to be bringing the 3 adversaries that it's suggesting, but I'm also going to be bringing in 2 more on top if I'm going to remove the minions. Now, just another suggestion when using a solo adversary, you want to make sure that you put it in an environment that it's going to thrive in. It's home, something that it knows very well, something to that effect that it can start utilizing the ins and outs of that area. They're going to know that inside and out, and they should, and it should look like that when their party's fighting a solo adversary. All right, so now getting into a challenging encounter. This is when you're going to try using minions equal to the party's size and a leader or a solo. A leader or solo, and then minions equal to the party size. So that way it starts looking kind of like a battle group to some degree, okay? Now, if you don't want to use a leader or a solo, what you can do is use minions plus a number of other adversaries equal to the party size. Now, to me, this is minions that equal the party size plus adversaries that equal the party size. Now, again, if you're going to remove the minions, go ahead and add in a number of adversaries equal to half the party size plus the adversaries equal to the party size. So again, if that's 4 players, you're going to have 2 adversaries that come in plus another 4 adversaries, as it's suggesting here. Tried and true, it does work out to be a very challenging encounter when you're dealing with more individuals than there are party members. It's a lot more fun that way, though. All right, now for the climactic encounter. This is typically going to be your arc ending sort of battle. It's huge. There's a ton of adversaries in this encounter, and I love it to death. So what you're going to do, you're going to use a leader. You're also going to bring in minions equal to 1.5 times the party size and a number of other adversaries equal to the party's size. This is going to be huge, okay? Now, again, I would also suggest that you instead, if you're going to bring minions, don't do 1.5 times. Make it minion groups and bring in a number of minion groups equal to the party size. This is going to be like a minion group of 3. You're going to bring in, if you have 4 players, 4 minion groups of 3 adversaries each. And those are going to be those minion types, okay? I can't stress that enough. Mainly because you don't want to overpower the party, but you want it to feel big. You want it to feel almost out of their hands, almost out of reach, okay? Again, if you are not going to bring minions into this climactic encounter, I suggest that you do half of the party size in adversaries, plus a number of adversaries equal to the party size, plus the leader, okay? This is going to be really fun, really cool. And now the leader typically empowers their surrounding allies in some way, shape, or form. So this is going to make those adversary types that are not minions more powerful, for sure. So, caution. All right, so the way this should be used is you should think about the level of power you are trying to throw at your party. If you're trying to bring in a challenging encounter, yet you don't want to use the suggested number here, and you want to bring in a solo of a higher tier. All right, so for my final note on encounter difficulty, I want you to realize that it is okay to bring in a climactic encounter for a tier 1 party. That is perfectly fine as long as the power matches, as long as you're using those tier 1 adversaries. Or if you're bringing in higher tiered adversaries, that you're using fewer than the number that is suggested to create that challenging encounter. Same goes for a tier 4 party. You do not have to bring challenging encounters all the time to a tier 4 party. You can use an easy encounter, and that is perfectly okay, especially when the context calls for an easy encounter or when it calls for a standard encounter. That is perfectly fine. You can also bring in lower tiered adversaries when dealing with a tier 4 party. That is no issue at all, especially if this tier 4 party has gained a lot of power. It should feel really epic when they're just cutting through tons of adversaries, tons of minions that are more like tier 3 to tier 2. So you can bring in a ton of adversaries into that encounter, even though technically it's probably only going to be considered standard to maybe easy at that point. It all depends on what you want to do, and I think that's what's so great about this system is I can think of an easy encounter at every tier that my party can be at, and it's still going to be fun. I can think of climactic encounters at every tier that my party's going to be at, and it's still going to be epic no matter how you slice it. That's why I like Daggerheart and the way that they've enabled you as the GM to be able to create some fantastic encounters for your party. And it doesn't all have to be combat either. That's the fun part about this is there are social encounters that you can utilize, and we're going to get into all of that. So when considering the types of encounters that we are going to build today, be thinking about whether that encounter is going to be considered easy or standard, how you can bulk it up to make it a little bit more challenging, or how you can take what would normally be a challenging encounter or a climactic encounter, and how can you draw it down so it's not going to be that. And you're going to be able to identify this as we go through the different scenarios for each of these adversary groups. You're going to see how this could be an easy encounter or how it could be really and truly a climactic encounter. But there are ways that you can mitigate all of that down. And again, it all comes through context. All right, so now getting into today's adversary, we are talking guards today. All right, they are necessary from your settlements all the way to your cities. You got to have guards of some kind inhabiting these cities, protecting them and keeping them safe. Now, this is separate from a military force, and that's going to be the main thing I want to highlight. However, that doesn't mean that they are exclusive in the encounters in which you can bring them into, okay? They don't have to be completely separate. You can kind of combine, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. But we're going to talk about the different adversary guards that there are at our disposal. Now, mind you, this is 1.5, so there's only 3 of them, but that's kind of all you really need right now. So let's get into the different adversary types first, and then we'll talk about the different situations, different scenarios that guards would most likely be a part of. So let's start with the Bladed Guard. These guys are your baseline adversary, your standard type adversary that are going to be used in pretty much every encounter that you create. All right? You cannot go wrong with the Bladed Guard. They come with 2 pretty solid features, from the passive shield wall to the action detain. Really and truly, I like detain because now you get to utilize, upon a successful attack, mind you, you get to utilize the stress that they come to the table with. Nothing wrong with that. They do have 5 hit points, which is pretty solid, and 5 major, 9 severe. They're good as a tier 1, and I like that they're tier 1 because then it gives you more room to actually tier them up to tier 2, 3, and 4, depending on really and truly what level of guard they're really going to be. How well trained are they? You know, what kind of gear do they have on them? You can start looking at a lot of this stuff more realistically from the city standpoint. You know, like how well trained are the guards in this particular city, or even the village or the town? You know, what kind of training do they have? And you can look at that from the tier standpoint, okay? Now, their difficulty at 12 does make sense. Now, when dealing with guards from like a village or a settlement, they're probably not going to be a 12 difficulty. They're probably going to be more like a 10, and they might not be doing as much damage. You could make them more of like a 1d6 instead of a 2d6 plus 3. You can make it a 1d6 plus 3. You can alter their stat block a little bit to kind of fit the situation. That would make more sense just based off of the context of what's going on in your world. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. Guards aren't always going to be like the best of the best, nor should they appear as such. So you can do that within the stat block and really make them feel not as well put together as some of like the city guards or the town guards. Like some of them are probably more well organized and more put together than your villages or your settlements. Also, don't forget to use their experience +3 with the local knowledge. Local knowledge is a necessary one to have, I would say, and that should go in with just about every single guard stat block here, mainly because your guards are from the local area. That's a necessary thing for them to have, and so they will be able to pull out when somebody's lying to them, because they will have that local knowledge to be able to pull upon when somebody might be lying about what somebody has done or is doing currently. You never know what your players are going to come up with. But your guards should be a little bit more wise to some of the tales that they've heard before. They should understand the people that they do guard, whether they live with them, whether they work with them, whatever, or just see them on a regular basis. All right, so now getting into the archer guards. The archer guards are your ranged type adversary, and they play exactly as that. You do not want them up front trying to do all the damage. You need them in the towers, on the gates. They are going to be basically away. They're going to have the range. They're going to have some defensive defilade away from the players. So the players are going to have to deal with that aspect, assuming that there's an instance in which archer guards are going to be needed in a conflict of some kind, okay? But their feature of Hobbling Strike, you cannot go wrong with. It's a great complement to their weapon attack. Now, this is definitely a feature you want to utilize as much as you possibly can, to the point where your archers might even just stress themselves out to do it in order to detain somebody. That Hobbling Strike is going to really put your players at a disadvantage in a lot of different ways. Not only from the fact that they're getting damaged, but also actually putting them at disadvantage on any agility rolls until they clear at least one marked hit point. Like, that is crazy good when it comes to dealing with your players. Now, it's not just your players, though. The guards can act as allies, but you should be looking at this from not just a, hey, this is going against my players, but just in general. Because you never know when your players are going to gather allies, and they could just very well be guards. All right, so now we have come to the head guard. This is your leader type adversary, and he definitely plays as such. Love the head guard because, let's face it, the two features that they come to the table with is going to be rally guards, which is great when you want to activate the rest of your guards without having to spend the action token, or rather the fear, to do so, okay? Now with the second feature, on my signal, this is a great feature to have at your disposal for your head guard. Now, after it's been activated, it actually activates after a countdown of 5, okay? And this is great as long as you have archers to utilize, because if you don't, this whole feature is pointless. But if you do, this is going to be deadly, all right? So make sure you look at all the features that your adversaries come to the table with, because you never know when you've made a bad choice in combination, or when you've got something sitting off to the side that can really make sure that your challenging encounters and climactic encounters feel that way. And this is a perfect one to do exactly that. Now, the head guard does come to the table with 7 hit points and 3 stress, along with 7 for their major and 13 for their severe, but they have a difficulty of 15. So they're going to be a little bit harder to hit. So I do like that, as well as the damage output. You really can't go wrong with that damage output, and they'll most likely be doing that often with their +4 attack modifier. So overall, pretty solid. Now their experiences are also local knowledge, but they also bring in commander. Don't forget to utilize their experiences and add in their pluses when they roll. This is a necessary thing when balancing out the power. These are factored in, so utilize it. For the love of goodness, utilize it, okay? All right, so let's get into the different scenarios in which your guards can find themselves in, whether that is with players or whether that's helping players, okay? But some of the ones that we forget about is the social encounters, not just the combat side, but also the social side. We forget about the social side more often than not when it comes to guards, and how they can actually help your party understand what's going on around them, particularly in the town or in the city or wherever they so happen to be. The guards are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this kind of thing. And especially if your players have been friendly with them right from the off and not just kind of resistant towards the guards, they might have an easier time of getting more information from the guards. Even if the guards don't know that much, they still know a lot about the local town. They know a lot about the way things work, people to talk to, that kind of thing. Guards are typically there to help in some way, shape, or form. They're not just there to detain people and, just be general assholes, but they're there to help, typically. So the first few encounters I want to talk about are going to be social. Mainly because the social side is actually a little bit more interesting, like I said before. You can't go wrong with this because it allows your players to learn more, okay? So with that, start off with guards at the gate. Assuming that your town is gated in some way, shape, or form, why not start off with guards at the gate, or guards just kind of hanging out by the main road that leads into the town or settlement? Maybe they're just having a chat and that's about it. They notice the players and then they just start talking to the players, like, oh, hey, who are you guys? Like they're going to want to find that out prior to anyways. Because a lot of the guards live and work in the same spot, right? They're not going to be in different wards of a settlement or of a village, They're going to be living and working with everybody else. So of course they're going to be naturally curious when players walk into their town, their city, whatever. They're going to want to know these things, because they want to protect the people that they already know and are basically probably family with, So giving your party that ability to talk to the guards early not only lets the guards know who they've got, but it also gives your party the chance to pull back their ire just a little bit, their curiousness just a little bit, so that way maybe the guards don't watch them as heavily. Or, opposite effect, if your players are going to be complete dickholes to the guards, maybe the guards watch them a little more often. Maybe they can't do anything in the town without all of a sudden noticing that there's a guard watching them. Never know. Maybe the guards need to, check their bags, check the cart, whatever they got to check it all. Maybe the guards don't like that the players are openly carrying weapons. You can have your guards ask to remove those weapons. Be like, hey, if you don't mind disarming, if you're going to stay, we're going to just go ahead and keep your weapons off to the side, okay? You're perfectly safe without them, but we just want to make sure. Whatever it is, whatever the reasoning is, it doesn't matter in the end, but whatever the reasoning is, like, try and make your players make a hard choice. Do they want to give up their weapons? Their weapons? Or are they going to go, you know what? That's perfectly reasonable to ask. We are random people to your town. You have no knowledge of us, and we have no knowledge of you. Perfectly fine. Or, we're not coming through then. We're walking out. Like maybe they leave. Either way, it's going to generate some interesting decisions that the players have to make. Okay? Now for the second social scenario, which is similar to the first, but the second one is just going to be a random search that the guards are going to do. Every now and again, if not all the guards have met the players, they're not going to know them, So they may be curious. They may want to know, what are these people doing here? So, of course, they want to randomly check them. Be like, hey, what are you guys about? And depending on the story, depends on what happens. And you should have a varying level of interest that the guards have, okay? Dependent upon how the players play it. If they're trying to deceive them, if they're trying to charm them in some way, shape, or form, persuade them in some way, whatever it is, that should influence the way the guards now see the players. And a random check is a perfect way to do that. Or even unwinding in a tavern. Guards also go to a tavern, they're going to want to relax a little bit. They might want to play some dice. They might want to check on the local innkeeper to be like, hey, is everything all right? How's the night going so far? Any fights? Like they may want to know. They might want to check up. Nothing wrong with that. And you should insert your guards a little bit more. We forget about the guards. It's like towns exist with no guards sometimes, when that's not exactly true, right? So, just saying, think about it just a little bit. All right, so now getting into the combat scenario. So a lot of this is going to be reactive on the guards' parts, but mainly on your part, because you never know when your players are going to pull some crap just because. They may feel pressed to do some kinetic activity. When that happens, you need to be ready. Your readiness levels have to be high. So, I'm going to help you out with that just a little bit. Mind you, this is just some ideas to kind of help guide you in the right direction. with your thought processes on your guards, because not a lot of people think about this, okay? I went through a little bit of security forces training, and I'm just saying, there's a lot of things that we don't think about. But now that I've been through that, I'm now been thinking about it, okay? I'm just saying, it's crazy what you learn and how it can actually affect your games. So to start off with, guards are going to have a code of some kind in which they use with each other, the way that they talk to each other. You never know when the speech that they use is going to change what happens, okay? Not just that, though. Your guards are going to be ready to go with certain codes, whether that's using a whistle or a horn to be able to, whether they're blowing that in a certain pattern to try and notify people in a different ward, like, oh, hey, you got to come quick, like, get over here. Or it could be like, oh, hey, we're under attack, but all people hear are the blow of the horns or the blow of the whistles, you know? Give your guard some extra gear than what the stat block says. The stat block's not going to say that much, but what you need to do is think about it a little bit more creatively in terms of what the guards would have, because they're all about their own survival as well as the people around them. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you're not only able to signal each other, especially when you need help, but also that you have certain gear on hand to detain people, to catch people, to stop people. Grab some manacles. You cannot go wrong with manacles. They need to have something on hand to be able to detain and restrain. Also the gear. I know a lot of the bladed guards only have long swords, but that's probably not overly accurate, and depending on where you're at, they're most likely going to have a crossbow of some kind. Something really easy for them to be able to whip out and fire. Now, not every place is going to have that. However, you should consider whether this is a city, whether it's a town, whether it's a small settlement or a village. What kind of gear would they have? What kind of gear do they want to have? Do they need? Are they on the outskirts of their region? They're probably going to be a little bit better trained. They're probably going to be a little bit better equipped. Or are they on the inside of the region where they really don't have any stressors to worry about, so they might be lightly armored and lightly geared by comparison to their counterparts on the outside. Now think about what kind of city that your guards are in. Is it an arcane-focused city? Your guards might have magic capability in some way, shape, or form, whether that's an item that can cast a specific spell like a firebolt of some kind, or whether your guards actually have spell capability and different kinds of spell capability based off of, let's say, their ability to capture individuals, detain people through magic, or to be able to utilize some more attack spells, you know? Never know what you may need and what you would actually have. Some guards, I have a whole city of magic-capable guards. Some of them only have magic items that they use to detain multiple targets at the exact same time. My players do not want to deal with that. I'm just saying, don't ever mess with my guards. They'll mess you up. But then you've got your religious guards. Why wouldn't you have religious guards that are just normal guards, that aren't like paladins, that aren't your seraphs in any way, shape, or form, that are actually just normal people, but maybe some of them have a little bit of capability. You know, maybe they have just a small amount. Or maybe they tried to go and be a part of the holy army, as it were, but they just didn't hack it. They just couldn't cut it. Maybe that's a hard thing to get into. So instead of taking everybody, they only take a few people. So the rejects maybe become guards. Some of them have healing capabilities. Some of them have divine damaging capabilities. Who knows? Utilize some variant guards like that and really make your world a little bit more interesting. Okay? Just tiny bit. So when we start talking about the reactive combats that your guards are going to get into, we've got to establish what their signal code is. We got to establish what their gear is. Now that we've got those out of the way, now we can get into how you build those encounters. Because a lot of those are going to be challenging to climactic, most likely, depending on what's going on. Especially if your players are generating that. It may start off easy at first, and they might have killed a guard in an alleyway, or maybe they killed a guard in the open street. And eventually, it gets bigger. And this is where we start talking about the escalation of force. Okay? When you start talking about escalation of force, what we mean by this is it starts off small, and then it's slowly going to grow to something larger. And this can get deadly really quickly, dependent upon your players and how they go about this. Because what if they don't turn themselves in any way, shape, or form? Your guards have no choice but to escalate. If your players choose to be belligerent, if they choose to be absolutely obstinate to anything that the guards say or try to do, those guards have no choice but to increase that escalation of force, okay? It just has to escalate from there continuously. So it could start off easy with a small guard patrol. And your players decide to mess with that. So they're going to come up with things, plans and processes in place to deal with that kind of stuff. So it starts off easy with 4 guards being attacked. Whatever the case is. It's going to escalate from there because one of the guards is going to prioritize signaling the other guards. Signaling the other people like, hey, look over here. There's something going on here. You know, they're going to draw in that attention. So make sure your guards are ready to deal with that. Make sure you are ready, primarily, not just your guards, but make sure you are ready to deal with that and what that process is. Doesn't take long to figure out, but you don't know you need it till you need it, okay? So just get that in place and already have a rough idea of what that is, and you'll be good to go. You will not be unhappy. But it will escalate to being standard, to being challenging, to being climactic really quickly, especially as you stack guards on top as more guards respond. It can go from your 4 guards who probably have been killed just then to being 8 guards come out of nowhere, and now we're getting into challenging levels of combat all of a sudden. And then it goes even from there where the head guard starts coming out with a couple of head guards for different shifts around the city or whatever. They start coming in and converging. It's going to happen. Just be ready for it. That's all. That's all I'm saying. It's way more fun this way, and it's most likely going to result in player death, but guess what? At least you get to exercise some player death rules, which makes it so much more fun. Alright, y'all, I hope that helps you out in some way, shape, or form. I know that's not every scenario under the sun that you could possibly run into. Your players are going to, of course, create some interesting situations, but I hope that helps you in terms of being ready for it. Because I know a lot of those are going to be reactive combats, very kinetic situations, and that's okay. But I hope that helps you get ready for those. And I hope it also helps you think about some of the social encounters that you can do. Make your guards a little bit more interesting for your players to interact with. Make them care about your guards maybe a little bit. And I hope that helps you to care about your guards a little bit more. So until the next one, y'all, keep that shield wall strong.